Welcome to ASAI's member webinar with Ben Althoff. Ben is working full-time for HMC Inc., also freelancing through his company, Polycount Studios. Ben Althoff is an award-winning architectural illustrator with a fine art background. He has been cgarchitects Visualization Pro of the Week and featured in publications such as Expose 7 and 3D Creative Magazine. These webinars are hosted by the American Society of Architectural Illustrators. ASAI was founded in 1986 as a professional organization to represent the business and artistic interests of architectural illustrators throughout North America and around the world. Membership to the organization is not limited to professional illustrators, but is open to architects, designers, teachers, students, corporations, and anyone engaged in the serious pursuit of architectural drawing. If you have any questions about membership with ASAI, please email me at hq@asai.org. Today, Ben will be demonstrating how to optimize your V-Ray render settings to get the best possible render quality and fastest render time for a given scene. V-Ray is developed by Chaos Group. Chaos Group provides innovative rendering solutions for the media, entertainment, and design industries. For over a decade, their flagship rendering software, V-Ray, has set the standard for speed, quality, reliability, and ease of use, and it has become the rendering engine of choice for renowned international studios. Ben will answer questions throughout the webinar. Please feel free to post your questions in the chat bar, and he will answer them intermittently during the webinar, as well as a short Q&A session afterwards. The test scene will be available for download once the recorded webinar is posted. Today, Ben will be using V-Ray 2.4 for 3ds Max, and with that, I will hand over the controls to Ben.
Okay, so this conference is being recorded. Okay, so let's get started. Hopefully the people using 2013 got that new file. If not, I will show you the scene and we'll kind of go from there. Okay, so in this tutorial, I kind of just want to focus on ways to use the V-Ray render element, V-Ray sample rate. For those of you who did not hear, basically what it does is it allows you to see via a range of colors from blue to red what's happening with your sampling at any given time, whether it be sampling from your anti-aliasing to your GI to your individual materials. So that's kind of what we're going to be going over. I don't really want to get too much into like sample theory or anything like that, just for time's sake. But I do have a collection of links that I'll be showing everybody. It's kind of the way I learn best, is kind of just perusing the internet. Let's see if I can share this other screen. Can anybody see my second monitor? Okay, good. So this is the tutorial that Akin Biljic, I guess is how you pronounce his name. He posted this great tutorial on basically the same exact subject, but it goes into much more detail, getting into, like his ray tracing 101, so you can really start to figure out what your renderer is doing under the hood. This is a great example of exactly what I'm about to show you. Feel free to peruse it in your own time. I'll post the link on the meeting. Okay, Tina said she's going to send the URLs in the following email. So once this webinar is done, we'll send an email to everybody with these links so that you can actually see them. This is another great one. I'm going to be demonstrating using brute force and light cache. This tutorial here will give everybody more options as far as using a radiance map or whatever it is you want to use for your secondary bounce. So anyway, let's get right to it. I am working in a linear space 2.2. If you have not gotten into that much yet, I will send a couple tutorials your way after the webinar in an email. Okay, so what we have here is basically a simple scene. It's just a box with an open end, a V-Ray physical camera. I love the V-Ray physical camera only because you can set it like an actual camera. If you haven't gotten comfortable with using this yet, I would suggest doing so. Let's see. Okay, and then I have a few spheres placed inside. Each sphere has just super basic materials. Nothing's been changed except for on this sphere there is refraction, no reflection. This sphere there is reflection and with some glossiness and Fresnel IOR. And this one is just a very basic V-Ray SSS, and this one is kind of like a basic chrome stainless steel kind of material. I have a few lights up top, V-Ray lights. Nothing has been changed with those except their multiplier, which is down to 2. Then I have one here for the refractive material to kind of like highlight what's going on there. Let me know if I'm going too fast, anybody, please. Okay, I've kept the output size relatively small for speed. My suggestion is if you're doing this workflow and testing your sample rates, I would do save out. Save it out once we've done this. Save it out so that you can reuse it for like test rendering, and then once you get to your final image, you kind of go through the process again and just make sure that the samples are set for a larger image, and then kind of save that out for your final passes. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by going to our global switches. Everything in here is pretty much set to standard, except for this guy. Adaptive DMC is set to minimum 1, maximum 4. Area anti-aliasing. GI is turned off, so everything else is turned off. Our settings are all pretty much the same here, except for my memory I've bumped up. And I've changed the region division to much smaller because it's easier for V-Ray to handle a smaller region division, so the buckets don't get stuck on any one area. But that won't really make much difference in this scene. So what we want to do is open up our global switch. Actually, even before that, let's go to our render elements. For those of you who do not get the scene, in the render elements, we're going to obviously add our V-Ray sample rate. So you go to add, and then scroll down here to V-Ray sample rate. It is different than V-Ray sampler info. So add that. And I've added V-Ray refraction, V-Ray reflection, V-Ray light, and global illumination, just so that as we're going through this, we can look at those and see exactly what's going on. Right now I just have default max lights on, so when I go to light, all you see is basically flat images with max's default light on. But once we go through this, we'll be able to see in our reflection pass, you know, all the noise that's going on in the reflection, in the shadows, and so on. And same with, you know, every global illumination, refraction, and all that. So for the most part, I'm going to stay on sample rate just so we can see what's going on as we do it. So with these settings, and I'll let everybody see it again. Here's my color mapping, 2.2 linear. And if you're not working in a linear workspace, if you go to Preferences, Gamma LUT, change your gamma to 2.2, affect color selector and materials, and then hit OK. If you're working in a max later or earlier than 2014, you'll have an output option here. Leave the output as is. Okay, so let's get started. Right now we're just going to, since in our global switches we have reflection refraction turned off, we have our scene lights turned off. I have them turned off anyway. And then we have our default lights turned on. You can turn off filter maps, not that it matter, there's no maps in this scene. So all we're focusing on right now will be adaptive DMC. So when we hit render, let me make sure my DR is turned off. It won't. Okay, so we hit render. Basically, this is what we get. We get, you know, sampling around the edges, which is fine. That's kind of what we're going for. And then we get these areas where it's not so good. We're just getting oversampled. We kind of want to spread that out. So what we'll do is we'll turn up our adaptive DMC to something like, let's just go double. And now when we double up, remember that V-Ray calculates this in squares, so it'll actually be 8 times 8, which will be 64 samples will be sent out. So it's not 8 samples, it's 64 samples. So remember that. So if you go up to a ridiculously high amount like 50, you're going to get a ridiculous amount of samples. So just remember that. So let's just go up to 8 and see what happens. So we'll hit render, and you can see that we're getting better sampling on the walls. These are starting to these red areas are starting to recede back, and we're getting better sampling. So as you can already see, this is a great way to fine-tune your scene to your specific needs. So we can go into, this is what our RGB is looking like, same thing. So we want all these red areas to kind of recede back towards the edges. So let's maybe just go up to 12 just for the heck of it. So you can see we're getting great now. All this is cleared up. All these have started to recede back towards the edges. It's looking really good. And I think based on this, I'd be happy with the sample rate. So we could probably move on from there. So you can already see how if you're in a tight deadline, and you know, let's just say it's due tomorrow, and you're like, oh well, it's going to take forever to render. Well, now you can actually go in and decide, okay, well, I don't mind if this area is a little bit noisy. If it's going to save me a little bit of time, I can live with that. So you're really kind of taking this into your own hands, which is a very good thing to get used to doing. So now that we have that, we'll go back into our global switches. And again, let me know if I'm moving too fast. We will turn the default lights off, and we'll turn our scene lights on. And then I'm actually going to go in here and manually turn my lights on one at a time so that I can actually see what each light is doing as we're going through this. So right now I'm going to turn my V-Ray dome light on. And it's got the HDR on it. Subdivisions are 8. Everything is pretty standard. And a multiplier of 1. It is invisible. So what we'll do now is we're going to hit render. Actually, let me turn my distributed rendering back on. Okay, so when we hit render, you'll see that the red and yellow has started to seep back into the scene, but that's based solely on that one V-Ray light. And my distributed rendering is not working. See the noises come back in everywhere. So what we can do at this point is, instead of turning up our, there they are, instead of turning up our DMC samples or our global illumination samples, what we're going to do is we're going to just turn up our light subdivisions. So let's just do double, we'll go to 16. Let's see. Okay. You know what, that never seems to work. Okay, when using HDRI, that never seems to work, so we're going to turn these lights on instead. Thought I'd give it a try. Okay, and the viewer lights are set to multiplier of 2, subdivisions 8. Let's render again. Okay. So now that more light's entering the scene, we're getting a little bit clearer samples up here north towards the top. If anybody can't hear me clearly, make sure that your microphone is not muted or your headset is not muted. Okay, so now that we've rendered it, you can see these are the sample rates. So we'll go ahead and double the subdivisions on the light by 2 to 16, which, keep in mind that that's actually 32 samples that will be sent out. So we'll hit render. So you can see it's starting to clear up a little bit, nothing crazy. Just very subtle. And again, we want these red areas to recede back towards the edges. All these green areas we want to recede back towards the edges. So we'll turn up our subdivisions again, maybe to 24. Hit render. You see again, they start to recede back. Blues are starting to show up. This is good, so you kind of get the idea. So let's just bump it up to like, I don't know, 45. There you go. It's okay. So you kind of get the idea. I'm going to turn these down again just for the sake of speed. Down to like 24 again. Okay, so once we've determined what kind of sample rates we're getting with our lights added to the scene, we're going to go ahead and add reflections and reflections and refractions. That's really hard to say. To the scene. And then you'll kind of see that red start to come back in again. Now you see there's a little bit of red coming in this corner. These red areas are showing up now because of the reflections. So again, now that we're getting these undersampled areas in our reflections, we can go ahead and go straight to our material, and again, instead of upping our subdivisions in here, we can up our subdivisions right in our material editor. So we go here and we'll add like 16, and that is for this material here, kind of our stainless steel chrome-ish material. And you can see in here that we're starting to get more samples, a little bit better. We can go up to maybe 24. So again, you can see these areas are starting to clear up. The reds are starting to recede towards the edges of those reflections. Down here again, it's getting much better. And you kind of do this as you go with all your materials, your lights, so that you can really have control over your scene. And we would do the same for this material, bump it up 24. Let's just go and incrementally bump them up all to 24. And you know, refraction, which would be this guy. That one's already looking okay, but okay. So once we've fine-tuned our materials and kind of get them to where we want them to be, we'll go back into our global switch, or into our GI, and then we'll go ahead and switch that on. Again, I'm using brute force and light cache. Subdivision is set to 8, light cache is set to 1000, number of passes is 12. And then we'll go ahead and hit render, see what we're getting now. Oh, and before I even move on, for your materials, again, remember you can go into your lighting and see, based on this, where you're getting your noise from. Just a good visual in combination to the sample rate. So let's hit render once our GI is turned on. So now we're building light cache. So it's going to take a little bit longer. Okay, so you can see just by turning that on, we're getting much better sampling over on the walls and ceiling. There are many different combinations between your primary bounce, secondary bounce here that you can use dependent on your scene. Brute force is particularly good for scenes that are small and don't have a lot of far back detail, because it is a very accurate sampler. So you can see it's okay. It doesn't look very bad, and again, you kind of play it by ear how you feel about what's happening. Like you see down here, there's some noise happening with this refractive material, and we can see that reflected here in our sample rate, that these are not getting sampled properly. So what we can do is, now that we have this open and we fine-tune our materials, we fine-tune our lighting, we can go into our brute force and up our samples there. So let's just double it to 16 and see what happens. Does anybody have any questions as we're going along? This might be a good time to stop and kind of get those out of the way. Okay. It's not really helping much. Actually, it looks the exact same. What other render elements you use? The render elements I use are, well, just for this purpose, are V-Ray global illumination, V-Ray lighting, V-Ray reflection, refraction, and V-Ray sample rate. Okay, so let's go back, let's set this to like 24 and see what happens. I didn't see much difference there. Okay, so you can see in areas like this, we're starting to get a little bit better sampling, not by much, so we'd really kind of have to crank this. But again, you really play that by ear based on the time you have to render. So again, this isn't really getting too cleaned up, so I wonder maybe we could, if we bump these guys up to like 46 or something. Let's see. So we'll check our reflections. It's looking okay, but you can see there's a little bit of noise here. Yeah, I know. Someone has a question, or a question says higher sample rates but faster render time? Question mark. It's again, I'm using brute force and light cache as an example. There are other ways to get decent quality renders with fast times. I'm only using this because brute force is pretty exact. A lot of the times I will use a radiance map because if I'm in a time crunch, I don't mind a little bit of noise in some areas if I need to. But again, there's many different combinations you can use to get good quality with good time. So it's kind of something you'll need to really research on your own to kind of get a good grasp of. Again, there's a tutorial that I'll be sending you in an email that kind of goes over multiple combinations, ways of testing those combinations, and so on. Oh, okay, so you're saying render time goes down, not up. Here, let me just show this so that we can see our render time. So let's go back down to 8, go back to our sample rate, hit render so we can get an idea of exactly what's happening with our render times. Oh, and you might be referring, because I'm stopping these renders early. That might be what you're referring to. I'll shut them down before they finish. So that might be what you're seeing. You see noise coming back in. Oh. 50 seconds. Let's try 34. Can everybody still see my second monitor? Okay. Okay, so you can really start to see how this can be a useful tool to really help you fine-tune your images based on fact, opposed to just arbitrarily bumping up subdivisions in any area. So this looks pretty good. Again, there's some noise, and if you were to bump up to higher output, you'd want to, kind of retest based on the amount of pixels you're setting out there now. But you can do that on your own. Again, any questions so far? That's what we're doing here. Because believe it or not, an hour is kind of a hard time to fill. And that's okay if you can't see my second monitor. There's nothing really to see on there. Light cache, if I was actually doing a test render, I'd probably bump down to like 500, maybe 400. Take these down, number of passes down to about 8, and probably do it that way. I should have done that to begin with. Okay. There are common settings. So the question was, are there any common settings or materials that you use for your renderings? There are not really common settings I use, specifically only because this is kind of the process I use for all my renders now. When I first started, I would kind of just go online and see what everybody else is doing for interiors versus exteriors, or studio shots, and just see kind of what other people were setting their render dialogue to. It's kind of a hit or miss, and it all depends solely on your specific scene. I mean, it sounds corny, but every scene is a snowflake, and they're all different. So this kind of just puts the power back in your hands and allows you to really know your scene and really be able to base your quality and the amount of noise on exactly where you want it to be. And materials is kind of the same thing. I mean, I have some basic materials, but subdivisions are always set to 8 to begin with, and then I, fine tune them as I go. But there are a million different resources out there to find very good materials. vraymaterial.de is a good one. Anyway, V-Ray Materials is a website. Basically, you can go and users will upload their materials and you can use them and rate them and all that good stuff. Let's see. Pardon being. Let's see. Let's see. We're going to recap. We have a couple latecomers, so we're going to recap on a couple high points. So for those of you who are coming in late, what we're basically doing is using a V-Ray render element. And if you go to your render elements tab, the element is called V-Ray sample rate, and we're using this to fine tune our scenes to our specific needs. So if you go in your frame buffer, go to your sample rate, you can see right now with global illumination on, with reflection, refraction, lighting, all on, this is kind of the sampling we're getting. And what we're trying to do is clean up the red areas and kind of bring that blue in so that we know, based on the sample rates, that we're reducing the noise. And again, so areas like reflection, if you want to even get this down a little bit more, go into your material editor and change the subdivisions there, opposed to just bumping up brute force or radiance map to who knows how much. I've seen people bump up, their DMC to 50 or 100 even. And you're kind of just gambling at that point. So maybe we can bump these up to, let's just say 44. And we'll hit render. We had another question. Is there any material that's more difficult to get realistic than others? I would say metals are pretty difficult to get accurate. Organic, like fruits and vegetables and skin, those are pretty difficult to get accurate. At least for me, those are my troublesome. So you see, you bump it up in the material and you're only increasing this area's, subdivisions, opposed to bumping up adaptive to who knows how much to clean up just this area. The green, for any latecomers, the green or the blue areas indicate a place where we're getting good amount of samples. The red area is where we want is noisy, so we kind of want to clean that up and push those areas out so that we can get better sampling in there. Which is why in a material like this, which is kind of like a stainless, we want to up the subdivisions in order to clean that up, opposed to bumping the subdivisions over here. And again, the best way to do this is to go into your global switches, turn off your reflections, your refractions, turn off your scene lighting, and turn on your max lighting. Distributed rendering does not like that. It does not render it, so we'll turn that off. Once you do, hit render. That's kind of what we get, the basic. You can see when we turn our sample rates on, you can see the difference that we're getting. So this is the way to fine tune it in every step of the way. Once you've fine tuned your DMC sampler and you've got those subdivisions where you want it to be, turn your lights back on to the default light off, render again. Once you've got your light subdivisions, because now that we've turned our lights on, those are going to be interacting with the scene. Once you've got your light subdivisions where you want them to be, then you can turn your reflections and your refractions in your scene on. Once you turn those on, then you can start fine-tuning based on individual material. Once you've fine-tuned based on individual material, you can go and you turn your global illumination on and start fine-tuning that based on, you know, all those other factors now. So hopefully that was a quick enough recap for latecomers. Again, any questions, comments? It doesn't even need to be a question on exactly what we're doing. If you're just curious about something, no problem, you're welcome. That all depends. If one camera is capturing one set of materials and another camera is capturing another set of materials and lights, I would do it based on the camera. And then once you fine-tune that camera, go and save your render settings. You go to your presets in your dialog box, save preset, and then you can save it as that specific camera and just load it every time you go there. And you can save a testing version, and then you can save a prelim version, you can save a final version, so that once you go back, you can just load them up and you're ready to go. Again, this workflow is, for me, I'm developing this workflow for myself only based on the professional need, where a client will usually want something ridiculous in 2 or 3 days, and you know, you really need to kind of judge it based on you know, you want to be able to judge it based on the noise you're getting and be able to control that and say, well, I can live with the noise in these corners as long as everything up here is crisp. Okay, any other questions? So I'm just going to render this back out just so that we can see where we're at. Okay, so here's our current sample rate. Ideally, I'd like these areas to all be well sampled blue, especially like in these shadowed areas on the back wall. Definitely in these reflections, I'd want to bump up. Here we're not getting enough. I got a question. What's the average time for a typical final render for me, like a render time? Typically, like I said, clients usually want things fast, and so I will have to do a lot of kind of negotiating with myself based on what kind of quality I want. So usually a good final image will take probably 3 hours to process, and that's using 40 cores distributed rendering. So keep that in mind as well. Another question, do you switch between world and screen for light cache based on scale of the scene? That's a good question, and absolutely. World would be better. Would be better for like an interior scene that has like a lot of openings, windows, and such. Just to kind of like help samples get into areas of question, like back walls, corners, and stuff like that. And in one of the tutorial links I'm going to send you, they go into that in a lot of detail. So hopefully that'll be a lot of help to you. And again, I know we'll be emailing these out, but just for the hell of it, there's one link. That's a great one. This guy demonstrates in great detail and theory basically what we're doing here today. So I would recommend reading both of those. But yes, so to answer your question, yeah, changing between world and screen does make a difference. And it would benefit you to do some research on that for sure. And again, there are a lot of scenarios where a radiance map will be a better choice. There are scenarios where brute force will be a better choice. A radiance map is a good choice for large exterior scenes with a lot of detail far back, so that V-Ray will only take minimal samples in the far back and really capture the detail that's up close. So a radiance map is a very good choice. And then brute force again is a great choice for small scenes like studio setups. But yeah, please beware, render time and quality can be very high, based on what you're willing to live with. Anybody else got any questions, inquiries? So I got a question, do you have a preference on AO versus detail enhancement? AO, what is that abbreviated for? Okay, so the question is, do you always use adaptive DMC and area for sampling? No, I don't always. Again, it's totally based on your scene. I do for the most part use adaptive DMC, but as far as anti-aliasing, I usually leave to area because it, for the most part, works fine. If I have like a close-up image, maybe I'll use Sharp Quadratic or Catmull ROM. And again, it's kind of just up to the user based on your personal preference. V-Ray is kind of like that. It just it's a lot of tools, and there's a million ways to use them. So just kind of dive in head first and start learning the tools, and then start using them in the best way that you know how. And for a final image, just kind of as a rule of thumb, I usually just set light cache to something like 2000. Pre-filtering is always good. It kind of takes the load off of other areas. So, and I'll bump those up anywhere from 10 to 50. It's always a good idea to keep your ray trace threshold on. I usually leave it to a default 1. Not photo map. Brute force, I've gone all the way up to 80 sometimes. Like you'll see it in you know, just to get really fine detail. It's probably a little unnecessary, but sometimes it's fun just to see how far you can push it. And I would suggest that to anyone. Just take all these settings and really see how far you can push it and see what the differences are and really play with them yourself. You know, bump this up to 100 if you want to. Don't. But, you know, just kind of like play with it. Really play with all the extremes and see what you get. Maximum size I render. That's the question. What maximum size do you render? Again, that depends on the print. If I'm printing 11 by 17, I'll usually go up to something like 3500, maybe even 4500, depending on the client and how specific they are. For screen resolution, I'll usually just do 1920 HD. For animations, a lot of the industry will render upwards of 3400 and then compress it down to 1920 to give you like a nice sharp picture. It's pretty extreme, and obviously they have loads and loads of render farms at their disposal. So hopefully that answers your question. But yeah, for screen resolution, if it's not going to be printed, 1920 is fine. If the client's picky and they really want to see a lot of detail on screen, you know, just go larger. Go up to 11 by 17, which would be like 3400 or something like that. Yeah. And Tina's going to jump on here in a few minutes to kind of just give you guys a few words before we send off. Whenever you're ready, Tina. And does anybody have any last questions before I go? And again, I'll include my email, and you know, if anybody here has any questions about the tutorial or any questions in general, or want to, you know, see another tutorial, let me know. The question is, are the IR map settings dependent on resolution? Yes. I mean, if you, like the settings I have now, we've gone through and we've, you know, got our sample rate to an okay spot, but if I was to bump up the resolution, some noise would start to come in the pixels that are in the new pixels that are popping up. So yeah, it is kind of dependent on resolution. If you're doing a test render, make sure your output size is to a test render size. If you're doing these tests on your final image, set up your final image and then start testing. And to keep the render times down, you can just test individual areas of interest. And if you haven't used V-Ray 3.0, which is betaing now and coming up soon, and coming out soon, you will actually be able to have a mask to select individual objects opposed to this little square selector. So that'll be pretty awesome and help with a lot of time. Okay, Tina's going to come on. Any last minute questions? No problem. Okay, Tina, I think you're good.
Am I on?
You're on.
Okay, thank you, Ben. I really appreciate you giving such a detailed demonstration of V-Ray, and hope everyone has taken away as much information as I have. A demo of V-Ray is available on their website, and we'll go ahead and add a link to uh, the follow-up email that we'll send out. Um, Again, I just wanted to thank all of you for joining this webinar, and we'd like to invite you to future webinars, which we hope there will be no glitches to. And we appreciate you all coming back and bearing with us through all those glitches. And we'll have more information on future webinars on our website at www.asai.org. So again, thank you all for coming, and thank you, Ben.
Thank you. And again, thank everybody else. I appreciate you listening to me go on about this.
Have a good day, everyone.
Thanks, Tina.